Welcome to Hope for Parents with Struggling Teens, the podcast for moms and dads in the fight of their lives. I'm Brandon Joffe, a licensed therapist and owner of Inspired Resolutions Counseling Center. For over 20 years, I've helped families face the chaos of defiance, addiction, anxiety, and despair. And I know how dark and lonely this road can feel. This podcast is about cutting through the noise. I'm here to weed out the unhealthy trends in modern mental health and get back to what actually works. Truth, clarity, boundaries, and connection. No fluff, no promises, just real help for real parents. So let's get to work. All right, today we are going to talk about parenting and social skills. And this conversation is not an easy one that I have in the rooms of therapy, but it's an important one, honestly. You don't get to opt out of being social without there being consequences to your children. And this starts at a young age. There's a hard truth. And a lot of parents that I've worked with don't like hearing it, like I said before, but your social skills, good, bad, or totally cringeworthy, are influencing your kids, whether you mean for them to influence them or not. Let's be real. Parenting's hard, but parenting is not just about setting boundaries or managing screen time or dragging your kids to practice. It's also about modeling how to exist in the world in a successful way. And if you struggle socially, if you're anxious when you're in groups, if you're awkward around other people and adults, if you're somebody who's conflict avoidant, or you have a passive aggressive way of dealing with big feelings, or you're just uncomfortable in everyday interactions, your kids are watching, they're experiencing, they are learning, they're absorbing it. And look, I'm not ever going to say that everybody should be super outgoing and the life of the party, but you do have to, take an honest inventory of your social presence. And I think it's important that every parent asks a brutally necessary question. Am I showing my kids how to connect? Or am I showing them how to avoid? Or maybe I'm showing them how to instigate. And I don't mean instigate in a positive way. So while you don't have to be the life of the party and you don't have to be some smooth talking, volunteer PTA hero, you do need to take responsibility for modeling healthy networking, healthy socialization. Okay. Now, I'm weird. I'm a weird dude. I'm goofy. I've never been the coolest guy in the room by any means. And so you get to be weird. You get to be even a little bit awkward, but what you don't get to be is blind. Okay. And I want to clear this up because I am not here to shame introverts. Introverts are important. Our differences in personalities is very important. Quirky personalities, or even people with neurodivergent traits, there is a way to be honest and diligent in embracing some of those tendencies and those parts to people's personality. But look, if you're a bit odd, if you're a little bit weird or more uncomfortable with, you're more comfortable with reading books alone than going to a barbecue, I want you to own it. I want you to be authentic, but also be very aware. Your kid doesn't need you to be the perfect, normal, outgoing parent, but they do need a parent who is self-aware, who's willing to have conversations, who doesn't make talking about these things taboo, doesn't get defensive, doesn't become almost delusional or in denial. Okay. And that's the line I want to draw. Authenticity versus unexamined dysfunction. Goofy is fine. Goofy with an emotional intelligence, that's awesome. But if you're socially avoidant, you can't make a phone call, you don't initiate a conversation with a coach, or you can't say hi to other parents at pickup, or you make no effort to make eye contact with people and kids that you see week to week, then you're modeling a problem, and you might be passing on something, a legacy that you don't want to pass on. Kids seeing these behaviors, they're not just learning your rhythm, they're inheriting your limitations. And that, I hope, makes some of you parents who are listening to this kind of perk up. Remember, this isn't just quirks. This is a legacy that you're leaving, and you might be leaving a legacy passing on unhealthy behavior, or you might be creating a situation where you are rejected in an unhealthy way because of these quirks. And so many adults, many people, they live in denial about their social struggles. Okay. Look, I'm aware of some of my social struggles, some of my, I have some behaviors and things that I will constantly and always want to work on. And so, I think we as adults minimize unhealthy behavior. And even if you are a functioning adult with friends, it's still important to take a look at how you're socializing. You can be messing up what you want to model socially and have a lot of friends. So it's not just I should have a big network and a lot of friends. It's am I modeling being the person socially that I would want to model and who I want to be, who I want my children to learn from. And so, again, a lot of parents will minimize these struggles, and they'll say things like, oh, that's just how I am, or I just don't do small talk. People are annoying. I don't like people. And a whole bunch of other comments. But underneath those comments is usually a layer of anxiety or shame or fear. And the more we deny those feelings, the deeper the ruts become. And the more quietly our kids either choose to reject us or follow in our unhealthy footsteps. And so I think that the first thing that I want every parent listening to this to consider is the power of vulnerability. Okay? Let your kids in on the journey. Okay? You don't have to fake confidence. You don't have to pretend to become somebody that you're not, but you do have to find the courage to be honest, the courage to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not weakness. I think most of us know that by now, right? It's a doorway, okay? It might be a doorway to an incredible connection with your child, that honesty. And when you say to your child something like, I don't know, I get nervous around people, but I'm trying to push myself, or I've always been a little socially awkward, but I don't want that to hold me back, and I don't want that to hold you back. You open up this connection, this space for honesty, and it might not happen in that moment, but it might happen down the road because you planted that seed. And I think that's really important. In these conversations, that vulnerability can happen early on, really early on in a child's life. And so when a parent can show a child what real growth looks like, not show them perfection, but show them authentic and brave change, you make it more likely for that child to be brave when it's time for them to be honest about themselves and make a change, okay? In this case, with social skills and networking, it doesn't mean that you become an extrovert. It means you model the try. You model pushing through uncomfortable moments. You model that openness to talk about these things in a way that doesn't model defensiveness and minimizing and that this is taboo kind of feeling, okay? When you demonstrate being uncomfortable, when you demonstrate that you're not going to check out and you're not going to give up, you are planting some of the most important seeds for your child's journey. Honestly, this might be one of the most important things you ever teach your child. And I know for a lot of you are going to deny this and you're going to fight letting my words sink in. And so let me tell you why this matters so much. Your child lives in a social world whether you like it or not. And if they internalize your unspoken fear or learn to mirror your withdrawing, your isolation, if they take on your struggle to form friendships, if they struggle to advocate for themselves, or they struggle to feel confident in group, they are more likely to be lonely. They are more likely to be bullied. They are more likely to have mental health challenges. They are more likely to become addicts, honestly. It not only may limit opportunities, right? At the very least, it's going to limit opportunities and doors that might be opened in their life. At the very worst, it might be the reason that their life completely falls apart and they don't have the resources to get back up. You failing miserably while having the skill of being social is different than failing miserably in life and not being able to bring anybody into your life, into your world for help. So if you model growth, if you model honesty, and you model navigating your own discomfort, and you model humility, you're giving them a head start. What you're doing is you're modeling resilience, you're planting a seed for resilience in them, and you're showing them that flaws don't have to get in the way of living a healthful life. They don't, your flaws can actually become some of your seeds for for your seeds for resiliency. Now, I said resentment, and what I was thinking is how many children I have worked with who resent their parents, and they can't put their finger on it, but they resent the way that their parents are socially and the awkwardness. And then it's almost like they feel gaslit because the parents act like it's not going on. They know it's going on, but they're too young to put their finger on it and put words to it. But there's something that just doesn't feel right. And even if the thing that doesn't feel right doesn't change, but there's an honesty about the fact that it's going on, that can make a child feel free, honestly. Okay? Now remember, you don't need to be perfect. This has nothing to do with becoming the perfect social networker. I don't want a whole bunch of parents trying to become socially slick. It's not about waking up tomorrow and making these giant, bold moves for changing your social status. What it's about waking up to the reality that your avoidance, your social issues have consequences, that your fear, if left unspoken, if minimized, becomes your child's burden. It's waking up to the fact that your awkwardness has an effect on them, but it has a monumentally larger effect if it's never named, if it's never spoken about. And it's about waking up to the fact that children who experience what I'm talking about without being able to have an outlet for discussion, and children who experience it but are made to feel crazy, develop significant insecurities. And so, again, I can't say this enough. Your willingness to grow, your willingness to be honest, your willingness to try, your willingness to get uncomfortable could change everything. So please don't hide, don't pretend, don't wait till you're older. Start now. If I'm speaking to you, if you're going, oh, shoot, this is me. I've always struggled with this. I want you to start with that. I've always struggled with this, but I want to do better. And I don't just want you to say it in your head. Say it out loud in the mirror first. Then say it, talk to your family about it, talk to your spouse about it, and find a way to communicate that to your kids. Okay? You can start saying things like, I don't always know what to say to people, but I'm going to learn how to try and do better. Some things you can say to your child who's struggling too is, man, I struggle with that too. But I want you to know we're in this together. You're not alone. You're not crazy for experiencing these fears. And remember, your child's watching. Just by a simple statement, you might give them permission to face something that they didn't understand. You might give them permission to find the courage, find the honesty, find the vulnerability to face this thing inside them that they couldn't name. Again, this might be the first kind of domino in them being able to find friends, speak up, stay safe, be more confident in the world. And like I said before, this might be one of the most important conversations you have. Okay. And so, oh my gosh, I remember working with a mom, and she came in because her son was isolating and wouldn't do anything, wouldn't join extracurricular activities, and had serious social anxiety, was not wanting to go to school. And so what I noticed was in the intake, the mother was very defensive of her child. And she said something that stuck out to me. She said, my son is shy like me. And she talked about how she preferred to be alone. And so I kind of tried to gently explore her history a little bit. And she said she never had close friendships. She didn't go to dances and all the stuff. And she didn't have that childhood experience that we kind of think of and hope our children would have. And so she fell apart in exploring this history. She completely fell apart and said, I think that I've taught him to do this. I think this is all my fault. And so, of course, it's not all her fault, but it was such an important realization. It changed the course of, instead of just focusing on him, in fact, we did couples therapy, mom and son. And as she talked openly about her fears, her experiences, as I worked on her social skills, her son ate it up. Honestly, it was kind of like I was working with her and he was a bystander, even though he participated sometimes. And I remember it gave him, he had the courage at some point in therapy to totally go off on his mom and talk about how embarrassed he felt, talk about how he felt bad for her at times, so he stayed back and didn't want to leave. Right? There was all this stuff that came out that was really difficult at one point. But the outcome of the therapy was this kid went from being almost completely isolated, nobody in his life, to having a couple of friends. And if I remember right, there's some sort of tech competition, something. But it was this thing that he did was presented at an assembly at the school. And that day, hearing about that day in his life was unbelievable. And it was, at the time, it was the most connected and hopeful this child had ever become, had ever felt. And so that would not have come had this parent not been vulnerable enough to say, man, I'm passing on a legacy that I don't want to pass on. And so it's a hard admission to make. It's a hard thing to even recognize in yourself, right? We've got all these armors of denial on. And so I was really admired this mother for having been able to do that. And I can remember another father that I had worked with a while ago, and they came in, the son's being bullied at school, no relationships, peer-wise, and the child was just really self-conscious. Had been diagnosed with before me with anything and everything, depression, anxiety, all the stuff, ADHD, and so what was interesting is I took ADHD off the table because the inability to pay attention was actually a part of the anxiousness that he was constantly feeling, not ADHD. And so in session, I can remember, it was really clear that the father avoided anything that had to do with emotions. It was all surface level. He was a good father, but it was all surface level parenting strategies. And I remember his child, the son saying, look, he doesn't talk to anyone. All he does is work. He basically described a completely cut off father. And I kept digging and had sessions with them, and I finally confronted the father, and the father was not happy. I didn't think that they were coming back. But I confronted the father that it seems like he withdraws and uses work as an excuse and being tired as an excuse. It was kind of this interesting dynamic because work-wise, this father could socialize, but there was definitely something going on, right? No close friends or family friends in the home. And so I confronted them, the father, and he watched his son totally break down, get really sad, angry, all the big feelings. And that's what it took for this father to say, wow, honestly, I mock any type of vulnerability or feelings talk. I didn't realize I do. He wasn't in the traditional sense of saying, you can never cry, you can't use weakness or have weakness in feelings. But what he would do is use a lot of sarcasm and that kind of surface level mocking. And so he said he felt invisible as a kid, and he realized that he might be repeating that process. And so the father ended up doing his own social kind of trauma work, and we started being intentional, talking about emotions, but also talking about interactions and plans for this family as a whole to do better in the community-wise. And so, again, I don't even remember talking about the bullying after a while. It just stopped being a thing. And the father was so overwhelmed at one point in therapy with some of the conversations going on because he had never had such deep conversations, and the overwhelmingness was a good thing. It wasn't seen as negative, but he would come into session saying, oh my gosh, I just had this conversation. I've been up all night thinking about it, and it was so deep. And it was really neat to see the father become more socially capable with his family. And then in turn, there were also more people. There were some, I remember they went on a family vacation with another family. Friendships were being developed. Connections were made outside of work, which is awesome. Okay. I can remember another, man, this one, this was a hard case. I worked with a mother and a daughter, and it is the same thing. This social anxiety, and daughter's depressed and not involved in the community or the school at all. And the mother was almost proud to say she's just a homebody like me. Some kids are just sensitive. At some point, the daughter had communicated to me, man, I'm really embarrassed by my mother. She's almost rude and avoidant of other people at school, of the other parents at school, and it's always been that way. And she had described an event that they went to where she just felt devastated because of how her mom acted in public and at this event. And so when we confronted the mom became unbelievably defensive, said, I will not change who I am. I'm not a fake person, and I don't care what people think of me. And this mom refused to participate and have this conversation anymore. And so basically she declined any personal work. And so it was really sad because over time, this particular client's anxiety got really bad. And it was many years of working with people at the school and this child to try to overcome things on her own. And her relationship with her mom just got worse. She made some progress with traditional anxiety work, but there was still this big gap, and the resentment and the embarrassment of her mom just kept coming up over and over again. And it was something we didn't have control over because this mother refused to even have a conversation without being defensive about her social skills. And that, man, that's one of those cases that just, when I think about it, it gets to me. And It's just, it's sad, you know? There's another example I have where, the parent brought their child in because they were getting in trouble, really disruptive, inappropriate jokes, and they would lash out at teachers in ways, the kind of class clown, but to a whole nother level. And it was interesting because the mother really wanted the whole family to work together, and the father wasn't going to do that. The father was kind of this charismatic deflector and turned everything into a joke. And again, it was kind of this like pride in the unhealthy social skills. Just like me, he's a class clown. And it just was, there was no way that I could find to have a healthy conversation about shifting things and taking ownership. And I can remember the father at one point said, hey, this got me through life. I'm successful. He'll be fine. This isn't the issue. And so, again, he refused to participate in any strategies for the family that I was hoping to work on. And he basically, I remember he didn't say it in these words, but he said something to the effect of, the world is too soft. I'm too soft. And, he really wanted me to work on his child just toughening up. And so, again, this went really poorly. I can remember the child saying, people just hate me, and I don't know how to stop being like this. And so the amount of work that I did with this child, I don't think it had to be that tough to do the social skills work with this child. And, and I don't know, it's just, again, that it comes out at me that he said, I think people hate me, but I don't know how to stop being like this. And I wonder, now I think I know what would have happened had the dad just said, hey, yeah, there's something I need to work on. Yeah, you know what? I struggle with this and I use humor and I'm inappropriate because I feel awkward or I feel disconnected. I know that could have been a big shift for this child. And so these examples I just gave you are the big difference between self-protection and self-reflection. Parents who grow, they're imperfect but honest. They set their kids up for relational resilience and social success, emotional clarity. The ones who stay stuck, they're putting their pride over their children. And so what they do is they pass on this legacy that isn't working, even if they try to convince themselves that it is. And so, look, you don't need to be perfect to make a difference. You don't need to fix everything to make a difference. You just need to care enough to be honest and real with your child. Okay? You making these shifts is not the thing that's going to make your child's life change, but it's going to be one of the dominoes and foundational pieces that might be really important. I'm not saying they can't get better without it, but why wouldn't we as parents want to do everything that we can? And so, it's a hard topic. I think one of the most difficult parts about this topic is that not everybody is aware. And so you might have to really do some soul searching. You might have to really take a look at some of the feedback you've got from people maybe you didn't like and that you didn't want to take seriously. And so I hope that I've helped at least somebody with this difficult discussion. Again, we're not shooting for perfection. We're shooting for vulnerability, honesty. And I want you to ask yourself, what legacy socially do I want to leave my child? Appreciate you listening. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Hope for Parents with Struggling Teens. If you found this episode helpful, please like, follow, and share it with someone who needs it. For more support and resources, you can visit us at inspiredresolutionscounseling.com. Remember, you are not alone.